You know that feeling when the world seems to freeze at the worst possible moment? Yeah. Mine happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Right in the middle of a $1 million video pitch to a cybersecurity client. Picture this, I'm 2 minutes into explaining our next-gen defense protocol. Charts are up. Confidence is high. And then, bam! The screen freezes. Not a quick hiccup. No. My face is locked mid-sentence. Eyes half blinked. Mouth open like a confused goldfish. I tried to recover. I did. But it froze again. And again. My client bailed after the third glitch. Let's reschedule, he said. Translation? We're done here. I didn't just lose a deal, I lost a $50,000 contract I'd spent months building. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a dropped signal. This felt like sabotage. And let me tell you, I don't do paranoia. I do protocols. Firewalls. Systems. I built my consulting firm from the ground up. Working for agencies I'm still under NDA with. My internet isn't supposed to fail. Not unless someone messes with it. Storming out of my home office, I grabbed the router and stalked into the living room. Already muttering technical curses. I fired up my network monitor. The data spikes hit me like a punch to the gut. It looked like someone had plugged my bandwidth into a rave. Uploads. Downloads. Bursts of activity at all hours. And not just one device. Dozens. I started tracing MAC addresses. Unfamiliar ones. All coming from my roof. I blinked. No. That couldn't be right. I climbed up there. Still in my collared shirt and office shoes. Ladder wobbling under me. And then I saw it. 3 large Wi-Fi repeaters. Industrial grade. Humming away like they owned the place. Bolted into my roof tiles like I was some kind of telecommunications tower. Not city equipment. No markings. No permits. No consent. What in the freshly microwaved hell is going on up here? I whispered. Hands trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. I took photos. Recorded video. Climbed down with shaking knees and went straight to the HOA office. Ready to raise hell. You have to understand, this is Cypress Ridge. A too clean for its own good suburban utopia where people smile to your face and file complaints behind your back. Lawn height is regulated. Christmas lights must be tasteful. And don't even think about wind chimes that make noise after 9 p.m. But even in this Stepford nightmare, I wasn't prepared for Karen Winslow. She was seated behind the front desk like it was the Oval Office. Pastel sweater. Overly lacquered hair. A nameplate that read President, Cypress Ridge HOA like it was a title of nobility. She smiled when she saw me. Ah. Mr. Beckett, she said. Hands folded. We've been meaning to talk to you. Wrong move. I didn't authorize any installations on my roof, I said. Voice clipped. And I didn't donate my internet to the entire damn block. Karen, cool as ever, slid a paper across the desk. It was a general notice. Dated 3 months ago. Supposedly informing residents of a community connectivity enhancement initiative. Except it had never been mailed. It was posted to the bulletin board. The one behind the HOA building next to the dumpster. Lack of response is considered consent, she said sweetly. As if quoting scripture. And you're such a tech-savvy guy. I figured you wouldn't mind. I stared at her. For a beat too long. She had no idea who I was. No idea what I did. No idea that she had just tapped into the network of someone who used to design counter-intrusion frameworks for federal defense contracts. Someone who once watched a hacker get geo-tracked and arrested mid-call. And she thought I'd just let it slide. I walked out without another word. Not because I was letting it go, but because the war had just begun. I named it right then and there. Walking back across the pristine sidewalks of Cypress Ridge, Operation Bandwidth Clampdown. This wasn't going to be a complaint filed in triplicate. This was going to be a digital reckoning. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. The moment I got home, I tossed the router onto my desk and fired up my workstation. Monitors blinked to life, 6 screens. Custom rig. Dedicated subnet. This wasn't some home office toy setup. This was war tech, first move, surveillance. I wasn't just going to unplug cables and call it a day. That's what they expected. No, this needed to be surgical, stealthy, and painfully inconvenient for every single person freeloading off my bandwidth. I traced every MAC address logged through my network over the past 30 days. By the time I was done mapping usage spikes and packet routes, I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. Over a dozen households, streaming HD video, downloading enormous files. There was even someone mining crypto. On my power. Through my signal. And here's the kicker, they had spliced the repeaters into my power line. Not some shared circuit or outlet. Directly into my breaker box. Clean job too. Hidden behind siding. Professionally painted to match the house trim. This wasn't Karen's clipboard crusade anymore. This was theft. I looked at the network map glowing on my screen. All those homes leeching my internet. My electricity. My patience. The whole eastern side of the neighborhood had turned my home into their digital feeding trough. So I did what any security consultant with a flair for the dramatic would do. I built the bait. I created a fake splash page. Modeled after those boring terms of service updates no one ever reads. The header, Sky Fiber Enhanced, Important Policy Update. It had the perfect color scheme. Industry standard fonts. Even a fake company logo I whipped up in Photoshop. Nothing too flashy. Just professional enough to look boring. Boring is trustworthy, once uploaded to the repeater firmware. The page became the new gatekeeper. The moment anyone connected to the Wi-Fi, it redirected them to this seemingly harmless update. And buried deep, very deep, was a clause. Users agree to incur a data usage surcharge of 27 cents per megabyte beyond the daily 50 megabytes free access threshold. Standard service rates apply. It was so buried that you had to scroll 6 times to see it. Of course. No one did. Within 24 hours, the system logged 10 unique acknowledgements. The page captured names, devices, and, most importantly, digital consent. That's when I pulled the trigger. I set up a back-end automation service. Registered a shell company named Broadnet Utility Solutions. And generated the first wave of invoices. Clean layout. Barcodes. QR payment options. Sent via email to each captured address. $42.19 here. $63.55 there. One bold household managed to rack up $148.76 in under 2 days. But the pièce de résistance? I sent an invoice for $2.129.33 straight to HOA Treasurer Gerald Matheson. I figured Karen's little cabal would notice that one. To my absolute delight, Gerald didn't question it. He paid it. The comedy practically wrote itself. But it wasn't until Karen got her own bill that the fireworks really started. I had a hidden cam installed in one of the repeater casings, motion activated, silent, and streaming straight to my server. The footage showed her storming into the HOA office, waving the invoice like it was a warrant for someone's arrest. "This is fraud," she barked. "Who approved this vendor?" Gerald. Poor man. Just blinked behind his glasses and muttered something about trial infrastructure partnerships. Karen's voice went up an octave. "No one runs connectivity in this community except me." I nearly cried from laughter. Back home, I watched the drama unfold like it was an HBO mini-series. Karen blaming the board blaming Gerald. Gerald sweating bullets. Meanwhile, I was sipping coffee, watching my splash page rack up digital receipts like popcorn kernels in a microwave. And just to add a final flicker of chaos, I renamed the Wi-Fi network, community_bandwidth_plan. Subtle, suspicious, and just believable enough to keep the illusion going. But I knew it wouldn't last forever. Eventually, Someone would start asking too many questions. So I got ready for the next move. Because this wasn't about money. It was about making them realize you don't get to mess with the guy who built surveillance networks for places where bad guys don't even show up on Google Maps. And Karen? She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Just when I thought I'd earned a moment to savor the chaos, the HOA came knocking, literally. One bright morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and nearly choked when I saw it. 3 citations taped across my door in big, bold font like I'd violated some suburban code of honor. The first one? Unauthorized rooftop equipment. Funny, considering I didn't put it there. The second? Non-compliant electrical routing. Sure. If you ignore the fact that the wiring in question was installed by HOA contractors. And the third? Oh. This one was my personal favorite. Public endangerment through unstable antenna deployment. I stared at the stack, blinked once, then laughed. Loud. The kind of laugh that probably made my neighbors consider calling a therapist. These people weren't just petty, they were completely untethered from reality. But I didn't tear down the citations. No. I scanned them, documented everything, and filed it neatly into a growing folder labeled Evidence, Retaliation Patterns. You don't win battles by reacting. You win by collecting receipts. Still, Karen was clearly trying to rattle me. A few days later, I noticed my trash bin hadn't been emptied. Then my mailbox was suddenly flagged as non-compliant. And then, get this, I got a warning letter because my Ethernet cable, which ran inconspicuously along the side of the house, was apparently a visual disturbance from the sidewalk. A visual disturbance. In a neighborhood where Jeff across the street still has inflatable Halloween decorations up in April. So while Karen played HOA whack-a-mole with fabricated infractions, I went digging deep. I pulled the HOA bylaws, power use agreements, tech policies, everything. And I hit gold. Their digital infrastructure guidelines, written in 2008. The most high-tech reference was a note about modem safety. These documents were relics, vague, outdated, and riddled with loopholes big enough to drive a server rack through. I realized something: they had no idea what they were doing. They operated off intimidation and a false sense of authority, not actual legality. And if Karen was going to play dirty, I was going to get surgical. Enter Penelope Baxter. She lived 2 doors down. Always quiet. Wore oversized straw hats. Grew tomatoes like they were state secrets. I'd never spoken more than a polite good morning to her. That changed one evening when she showed up at my door, holding a mason jar of homemade lemonade, and said, flat out, "I saw what they did to your roof. They tried the same thing on mine back in 2014. Big mistake." I blinked. Wait, what? She took a sip. "They didn't know I used to work for the FCC." I nearly dropped my drink. Penelope wasn't just a tomato-growing retiree. She was a former federal compliance officer who spent 3 decades auditing unauthorized frequency use and cracking down on shady infrastructure installations. And she was pissed when I showed her my surveillance screenshots, repeater logs, and power consumption data. Her face went cold. She muttered something about Part 15 violations and Class C unlicensed equipment, and then asked, calmly, "You got blueprints of your panel box?" Within minutes, we were in my living room, poring over energy use graphs, wire traces, and signal logs like 2 hackers planning a heist. Turns out, the HOA didn't just piggyback the repeaters on my network, they tapped directly into my breaker panel. Not via any shared circuit or outdoor meter. No. Someone had intentionally cut into my primary power line, routed it through a painted-over junction box, and fed it into the repeater array. They weren't just leeching. They were stealing electricity. Penelope leaned back, whistled softly, and said, "We can file an FCC complaint, or we can make it hell for them before that." I liked her style. That night, I modified the repeater firmware again. Nothing destructive, just a reset loop every 6 minutes. Every device connected to the stolen signal would drop, reboot, log the event, restart, over and over. A perfectly timed digital migraine. And for fun, I embedded a little voice prompt that played each time the connection died. Network interruption. Please contact your provider by sunrise. Neighborhood kids were screaming about Fortnite crashes. Parents were flooding next door with complaints. Smart lights were flickering like horror movie props. Someone suggested it was solar flare activity. Another person blamed aliens. Karen? Oh. She sent out an email blast calling it a cyber attack. She blamed external hackers targeting community infrastructure. I watched the entire circus unfold from my living room, sipping Penelope's lemonade. Feet kicked up. I wasn't done. Not even close. But I was warmed up, because if Karen wanted to escalate, she hadn't seen anything yet. The HOA didn't waste time. After the chaos from the forced Wi-Fi resets and network interruptions, I knew it was only a matter of days before Karen would try to wrestle back control. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got wind of an emergency closed-door meeting scheduled at the community center. The invite list: HOA board members only. No residents. No transparency. No accountability. Naturally, I wasn't invited. But here's the thing, they forgot one very important detail. Their little repeater network, the one they installed without permission, the one still attached to my house, was still connected to my system. They'd essentially left the front door to their digital house wide open. And I had the keys. Using a custom script, I patched into the signal being routed through the community center. A security cam feed from one repeater. 2 microphones picking up audio from the boardroom. And voila, I had full surveillance of their secret gathering from the comfort of my kitchen. I loaded the stream on my laptop, made popcorn, and waited. At exactly 7:02 p.m., the screen blinked to life. Karen stood at the podium in a beige blazer like she was about to launch a State of the Union. Gerald, the treasurer, was already sweating. 2 other board members sat stiffly, clearly out of their depth. Let's begin, Karen said, flipping open a manila folder. This cyber-aggression, this digital terrorism, has to stop. I nearly choked on my popcorn. She went on to rant about the splash page, the invoices, the outage complaints. We are under siege, she hissed. Someone is sabotaging the repeaters. Gerald raised a hand. Karen, we never got approval to install those. Should we maybe? Don't interrupt me, she snapped. The community doesn't need to know every operational detail. There it was. The smoking gun. I had been gathering logs, screenshots, surveillance footage. But now I had a live confession. Karen had just admitted on camera that the repeaters were installed without proper consent. She admitted they bypassed resident approval. And more importantly, she considered it justified. I hit record. Then I did something bold, risky, and oh so satisfying. I patched the live feed into a private Facebook group called Cypress Shadows, Unfiltered. A local gathering place for frustrated residents who'd grown tired of HOA nonsense. It only had about 50 members. I figured maybe 10 would watch. Within an hour, over 45 residents had tuned in. By the second hour, the video had been downloaded, clipped, and reposted to at least 3 other community pages. People were tagging their neighbors, sending links via group text. It spread like wildfire. One comment said, "Wait, she installed these? Without asking?" Another, "So Eli was right. This is insane." And then a glorious moment, Penelope messaged me. "Penelope, streaming it now. I'm watching this circus unfold with a glass of Merlot. They have no idea what's coming." Back in the boardroom, panic was setting in. Gerald pulled out a spreadsheet of payments, probably trying to explain the Broadnet invoices. Karen ripped it out of his hand, claiming he'd been financially negligent. Someone else suggested tearing the system down entirely before someone calls the state. They were unraveling live on camera. It wasn't just a board meeting anymore. It was digital theater. Karen was trying to plug holes in the dam. But she'd lost the crowd. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up different. Someone had printed a screenshot of Karen's meltdown and taped it to the same community bulletin board where the original repeater notice had been posted. Someone else started chalk tagging the sidewalks with quotes from the live stream. But Karen, she doubled down. A fresh stack of citations appeared on my door the next day. This time they accused me of community defamation, slander, and unauthorized dissemination of HOA materials. I laughed out loud, in my bathrobe, because what she didn't know was that I had already prepared a cease and desist letter, on official letterhead, co-signed by Penelope and a retired municipal judge who also lived in the neighborhood and was very unhappy with recent HOA overreach. The letter was precise, professional, and deadly in its clarity. It spelled out the violations, the energy theft, the retaliatory citations, the false accusations, all wrapped in a polite legal threat of civil litigation and formal investigations. The response? Silence, beautiful, glorious silence. But I wasn't finished yet. Karen had spent years operating in the shadows of bylaws no one questioned. It was time to shine a spotlight on every crooked wire, every unauthorized vote, every dollar spent without approval. The difference now? People were watching. And Karen was out of moves. The silence after our cease and desist letter hit Karen's inbox was telling. For 3 whole days, there were no HOA patrols, no passive-aggressive notes, no midnight emails threatening fines over non-conforming cable placement. It was eerie, like the eye of a storm, calm, quiet, and fake. Then, on the 4th day, it happened. A bright orange notice. Nailed, yes. Nailed, to my front door with all the drama of a medieval edict. It demanded that I immediately restore the roof to HOA-approved standard condition. Whatever that meant. 2 more citations arrived that afternoon. One for suspicious wiring visible from public walkways. The other? Violation of aesthetic uniformity standards because my Ethernet cable, which barely peeked from under a gutter, apparently offended someone's delicate sense of visual harmony. I stood there holding the stack of HOA tantrums, staring out at the neighborhood. And I smiled, because I realized something. They had no more cards to play. Karen was scrambling to punish me with scraps of authority, and every move she made only proved my case stronger. I had the logs, the power readings, the footage, the emails, and now, documented retaliation. I was done defending. It was time to finish this. I teamed back up with Penelope, and together, we filed a formal HOA transparency audit request. Deep in the bylaws, so deep no one even knew it existed, was a clause that gave residents the right to request full disclosure of financial records, communications, and vendor contracts. I filed it publicly, posted the request to the community forum, sent digital copies to every resident, certified letter to the HOA mailbox, time-stamped, tracked. Karen was no longer facing an annoyed tech nerd. She was staring down an uprising. That same week, I launched Phase 3 of Operation Bandwidth Clampdown, the Great Disconnection. I disabled the repeater signal, but not before reprogramming them to broadcast an USSID. Karen stole bandwidth. Anyone who tried to connect was redirected to a plain white landing page with one sentence: ask your HOA why your Wi-Fi is trash. Screenshots started flooding the neighborhood forums. Someone printed the page and stapled it to the community bulletin board with the caption, "Not all heroes wear capes." My inbox lit up with messages. Neighbors asking for help, thanking me, offering cookies, wine, even cash to fix their Wi-Fi. But I wasn't just going to be the guy with the router anymore. I made them an offer. I proposed a full, transparent internet service program, managed by me. Opt-in only. No surprise charges. Residents could sign up, get fast secure internet with clear billing and no HOA interference. I even offered a group discount. The results? Over half the neighborhood signed up in 48 hours. Karen? She lost her mind. She tried to block it. Claimed I was forming an unauthorized monopoly. Even reported me to the city as an unlicensed provider. But she hit a wall. Because thanks to Penelope's help, Broadnet Utility Solutions was now a registered, insured, local vendor, legally operating, professionally certified. I didn't just win, I locked it in. And to top it off, I applied for a construction permit to build a ham radio tower. It fell squarely within zoning laws. It had a legitimate communications purpose. But practically, it stood tall enough to block the sun from Karen's prized garden beds for 2 hours every afternoon. The foundation went in. The tower rose. And Karen? She stood in her driveway, arms crossed, jaw clenched, watching the last of her empire get swallowed by her own mistakes. And then, the media found us. What started as a quirky local news story about HOA drama and Wi-Fi theft snowballed into something bigger. Tech blogs picked it up. A digital rights non-profit wanted to interview me for a panel. I declined most requests. But the attention had a purpose. Now the whole world was watching. Karen couldn't retaliate in the shadows anymore. The final community meeting was held 2 weeks later, open to all residents, live streamed, and packed. Karen tried to give a speech about order, integrity, and respecting proper channels. But the room was dead silent. Then Penelope raised her hand and made a motion to remove Karen Winslow from her position as HOA president. Effective immediately. The vote? Overwhelming. Unanimous. Final. Karen stepped down, red-faced, wordless, and walked out without a single goodbye. Penelope became interim president. Her first act? Dissolve the Connectivity Initiative. Her second? Publicly open the HOA books. And her third? I motioned that Mr. Beckett, she turned to me with a grin, be recognized as the community's independent network provider. Applause. Actual applause. From the same neighbors who used to report each other for mailbox paint colors. That weekend, I finally climbed back up on the roof and unscrewed the repeaters, each bolt, each wire, each cable yanked with righteous satisfaction. I filmed the whole thing. Uploaded it. And yes, someone made a meme. But the best part? 3 weeks later, a small box showed up on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a tiny gold-plated router trophy engraved on the base, King of Bandwidth, Neighborhood Edition. I placed it on my shelf, right between the cybersecurity textbooks and the photo of my dog in aviator goggles. Because some battles are loud, some are dirty, and some are won with code, calm, and a well-timed reboot.